All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming there. It's good to have a physical event again. So I'm pleased to welcome Andy Mott. So will be delivering to us all his expertise on data mesh globally, and we entitled this talk "Data Mesh or Data Mess." So I will be data mess, the bad cop. He will be the good cop, and he'll try to demonstrate how to use another way of organizing teams and infrastructure and soft solutions to provide value in a fastest, in a better way, and I will try to provide the kind of reaction resistance we encounter sometimes in France. It told me in France, but maybe it's not only in France. In an actual organization with their legacies, their teams, their business teams, etc., etc. So, welcome. The stage is yours.
Thank you. That was a lovely introduction. I'm not sure I deserve most of that, but thank you for saying it. Before we get into it, there are, just for your reference, there are 3 books that I can point to that are free and you can download as PDFs from the Starburst website. You have to give us your email address, so it's not completely free. And then obviously we will send you loads of emails saying buy Starburst, that kind of thing. This book here is written by Zhamak Dehghani, who is the kind of founder of Data Mesh. It's a really good book. It'll take maybe 2 or 3 weeks to read. It's 330 pages of really good stuff. Data Mesh is quite unique in that we have a definition for it, and that book defines data mesh. And I say this because if I was to ask all of you in this room what your definition of a data warehouse is, or a data fabric, you would probably get as many answers as there are people. So we don't have well-defined terms in data, but for data mesh we do, which is interesting and different. This book here, Data Mesh in Practice, is an interesting book because it is written by some people who have built a data mesh and they've had some problems, and they've written about those problems in this book. It's quite short, 50 pages or so, just some of the problems that, the reasons why the problems they had with data warehousing and data lakes, and why they moved to data mesh, and the problems they had moving to data mesh. And this book up here is basically like a summary of the big book down here. It's much shorter. It's the sort of book that in England, I don't know if you do this in France, but in England you would probably put it in your WC, and when you've got a spare few moments, or you want to lock yourself away from your children, you can open the book and just have a few minutes. It's a much shorter book, but as I say, it's kind of a summary of this. And I am a co-author of Data Mesh For Dummies. So people have said I look like the person on the front. You can make your own judgment. So, I've got hundreds of slides, and I can talk for quite literally hours on this subject. And I will also talk quite quickly because I'm enthusiastic about data mesh. So, please put your hand up or shout out, not rude names, but something, if you want me to repeat or say something slower, because as I get enthusiastic. So, data mesh is really the idea behind data mesh is to solve a problem that we've had, and we have now for 30 or 40 years, which is basically this problem, where we have operational systems which are capturing and generating data. So we can think about things like your bank. When you take money out, when you buy something, when you put money in, this is going to give you your balance, right? You're going to have a balance all the time, which says you've got 5, or you've got 10, or you've got 0 or 5, and it's going to constantly change. Things like websites, right? So there is data about your behavior on a website. You're at this stage, you've got some things in the basket, whatever it is. So this is all about running your business over here. And then over here, what we like to do is we like to look at historical data. We like to get that data about, let's say, transactions, or about maybe customer churn, or website data, whatever it may be, and we like to analyze it, and we like to look for trends and machine learning and data science and all those words that we like to use, and to figure out how we can do things better and make a better decision, take an action, and therefore make some money or whatever the purpose is. And then we have this thing in the middle, which is basically getting the data from here to here. Again, we've got lots of words: ETL, CDC, ELT, data pipelines, etc. And if we think about this, these guys really just care about keeping the lights on. If if your bank can't tell you how much money you've got, then there's a big problem. If these guys over here, these guys are really just interested in data, right? They shouldn't really care about the fact that it's in S3 or it's in America or it's in France. They should care about the data itself, and that's really what they care about. People in the middle have this problem that they have to really know these systems, the data models in these systems, the technology. They have to know the technology that they are using to transfer data or transform data. They have to understand the business rules for all of the different parts of a business: operations, finance, risk, marketing, etc. Because those rules, the way the business operates, get codified into this process. And then over here, these same people who are responsible for this need to understand the technology and data models and the way people use data. And that's a lot. And so what happens is that these guys over here say, I would like to, I'd like some new data. And they say that to these people. These people will then say, I'll do that in 2 months or 3 months. And actually, that's probably too slow. These guys over here may have some interesting possibilities to capture more interesting data. So a really simple example, if we have a website, we are tracking the buttons that people press. So we get a web log. It may be really easy for us to track the way the mouse moves around the screen. Websites do this now. And that might be a simple switch. But why would I do that if I'm over here? There's no motivation. I don't care, right? Because all I care about is keeping the website up, not necessarily capturing more information. So missed opportunities and the inability to respond to business changes or business requirements are really fundamental problems that we have with the current architecture. And so data mesh is there to solve that, basically, to solve that problem. You can argue whether it does or it doesn't, but that's the objective of data mesh.
Do you need to have data governance in place? Is that a prerequisite? Because we face many situations when data governance doesn't exist at all, or it's pretty messy.
So data governance is a huge topic, right? And again, I would argue there's no definition of data governance. Again, I've got a definition later on. You do need data governance when you get into a mesh, and it's really important, and I can explain why. I would argue a lot of companies don't really have great data governance today, and because people ignore it, right? Because it's a thing that they have to get around.
Yeah.
That's really what data governance is today. It's a set of people who kind of say, everything should do these things, comply with these rules, and we've got these people over here who really just want to make better decisions. They want to exploit people in more and interesting ways. They don't care about the rules, really, because that's not their job. And we don't motivate people in that way. We motivate people to do the job that we want them to do, which is to make more money, not care about the rules. So I'm not going to go through all of this in detail because we'll be here for a long time. But the one thing that data mesh is, the one objective of data mesh, if I had to put it in one sentence, would be the ability to respond to change in business with data. Right? So it's literally that. So one of our competitors introduces a new product or service. How do we respond? What do we do with our products and service? Do we increase price, decrease price? Do we go after different segments of customers? What is it that we do? If a regulator says, banks or financial services must store data, must hold a different amount of capital or something, how do we figure out how to do that? Right? How do we respond quickly? And there might be internal things as well. Like we have, we onboard a new system, we have a new business unit. How do we make use of that data really quickly? That is really the objective of kind of data mesh. There is this other subtle one over here, which is people talk about this, but I'm not really sure it's actually happened yet. But this, we will all read surveys of chief data officers or CEOs where people will say, we have spent a lot of money on data, but we've got very little return, right? And really, one of the byproducts of data mesh is if we are able to respond and we are able to make better decisions and take better actions, we should be getting a better return from the money we spend on the data and people and infrastructure and computers and technology. So that's kind of a byproduct that some people will talk about, but really agility, ability to respond. So there are 4 principles of data mesh. These are simple rules, but they have very interesting results when we think about how they impact businesses. So we have domain ownership, which is this concept of instead of having a central team being responsible for the data pipeline, if you will, we decentralize that responsibility. So we have, let's say, marketing people become responsible for marketing data. They become responsible for getting that marketing data from the source, for transforming it and adding value, and then serving it out to the rest of the business, right? And so finance do this, risk do this, operations do this. Then the way they give that or make that data available is as a product. And people say, well, what's the difference between a product and a table or an asset? And we'll come on to that in a bit more detail. But let's think about it in this way. Today, if Arnaud is the central data person and I need some more data, I phone him up and I say, I need this other data to go into my report. And he, at some point, he will do whatever he needs to do and he'll make that available. Data as a product is really switching that around and saying, Arnaud is monitoring the things I'm doing with his data. He is looking at how I'm using that data, and he is then basically phoning me up and saying, I see the way you're using this data is like this. If I did these things, would that make your life easier? And I say, that's wonderful, Arnaud. Yes, please. So data as a product is really changing from reactive to proactive data management. And that's an interesting concept. And people will tell you lots of things about data products, but in the simple way is moving from a reactive approach, responding to requirements, to being proactive, looking for the way people are using data and making data better. There's a whole piece in there, we probably won't get time to talk about this in great detail. There's a whole piece in there about incentivization and motivation of people. How do we motivate people in marketing to care about making their data available to others in this way, and making it available easily to others so they consume it more. And I'll just give one anecdote here. I regularly talk to chief data officers around subjects like data mesh. And there's at least one in the UK who pays people. Just gives them money. So it's an interesting concept, right? The more people that use their data, the more money they get at the end of a month. It's very, quite simple. And the reason for this is we start to think about data having value. The more data is used, the more valuable it is. So why would I not give people money for creating some value in my business? Now, you might say, well, don't really want to do that, and that's fine. Other companies have adopted like a wall of fame. Andy's data product has been used by more people than any other, so he's going to be at the top and have his name in lights, and I'd rather have the money, but So this is moving from that reactive to proactive, and as I say, we could talk at length in there. To do these two things, and I would say that this is the heart, this is the most important aspect of data mesh. To do those, we need our marketing people, our finance people, our operations people to have some computers and technology and systems, and we can again dig into that, that they can easily use to build these data products. Right, and that's where this self-service data infrastructure comes in. Again, some interesting things that fall out of that, which hopefully we'll get time to talk about, And then the last piece, which is probably the hardest piece, and is becoming more in focus actually with chief data officers at least, and companies that are looking at data mesh, is federated computational governance. There's a lot of words there. So if I break that down, federated basically means we get a group of people who are in the domains together to define some policies, and then we have this computational thing, which is really we're going to automate the enforcement. So if I create a data product, I'm in marketing, I create a data product, and I publish it so that other people can use it, part of that publishing process, we're going to run a bunch of tests. Does the customer key have is the customer key 3 letters and 5 characters, or whatever? Most of the fields got data? Is there less than 20% have got nulls? Does the data product have security associated with it? Does it have metadata tagging associated with it? If it doesn't comply with those rules, which are automatically enforced, then people can't access it. We don't make it available on the mesh for people to be able to consume. And that last piece is really hard, right? There are no technology vendors out there that do this today. There are practices that people have adopted. Again, we can talk about that if it's of interest to people. And part of the reason for this is because this is all quite new. The first paper was published in 2019. Zhamak's definition of data mesh was only published this year. There is no common definition of data product or data as a product in the market. So being able to apply rules around that thing that we haven't defined hasn't happened yet. As I say, there's practices that people and organisations have adopted to do that automation, but that's just kind of where we are. So this is kind of data mesh in a nutshell. And for the other slides, we can dive into different areas of the different principles and have a discussion about them. But that's kind of if you like, what I would call the kind of the basics. Is there any kind of questions, any thoughts? Anyone violently disagree? Because they're the best conversations.
I had one.
Please.
I met some CDOs as well, and they think they have bring all the possible organization, such as ownership, the right pieces of governance, such as catalog, and it doesn't take. People don't use data enough. They have self-service tools, they have some trainings, etc.
Yeah.
And they try to do some showcase with certain use cases, but it doesn't take. And they don't know. I liked what you said about incentivizing people to use data, but they don't know how to do that.
So this is the consumers.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There
is no momentum. If they do some, if they take an initiative, it will be followed by people. But then it's slow down and it doesn't take.
So I guess what are the alternatives? They're not using any data, which people should not be making decisions if they have data. You should not. I mean, you're essentially guessing, right? At that point, put your finger in the air and hoping for the right answer, or you might be using data that you have kind of accessed. And one of the things I would say about data mesh is you're flipping that round and you're saying it should be easier for you to use the data product that someone's built for you than doing something yourself, right? And that's kind of we've had this concept of shadow IT. I don't know if you have that in France, where the marketing people or the operations people go and do their own thing. The reality is that data mesh, the concept behind it is you make it so much easier for me to go to a catalog and go, type in the word customer, hit return, I get a list of all things related to customer. I click on that, I get access to that data. That's kind of where we need to, that's what data mesh is trying to get to. Whether it gets there or not is a different thing. But that's the objective, right? To make it easier than to do something else.
And the proactive way you were telling us about, you need to be able to monitor the usage only of the catalog or of the actual data sets that you provide?
You want to monitor the usage of the data through whatever tool set they're using, whether it's machine learning, whether it's taking the data off of a stream, whether it's running a SQL query. you want to get access to all of that information as a minimum. How many people are accessing your data at a minimum? Actually, what you really want is how people are using the data, and that's a little more challenging. You know, there are ways and means of doing it, but how people are using the data is more important, really, because if you know that 80% of the people who use your data product, the first thing they do is join it with another table or another.
On Excel.
Excel's an interesting thing on this. But if you know that's the first thing that they do is join it, then maybe you make a new data product, a new version or a different data product. That is the result of those two things being joined, right? You're proactively doing that, and then you're marketing it through a catalog for people to kind of consume. That how piece is harder. It can be done, but then you're not even having to necessarily phone people up, right? Because you can see what they're doing, and you can see that actually this is the thing that most people do. So let's do it for them. Let's make it easier than doing something else.
When you told that the company who pays as much as the user use that data, how can the user
So they just capture all the queries that get executed in a database, and then you can just use a BI tool to access the database and say, you know, how many, which people have accessed what data, how many times has that data been accessed, etc., etc. So, and I actually believe that usage metric capturing forms part of data governance. Because it's an easy place to put stuff. Data governance is an umbrella term, in my opinion, for stuff. So yeah, you should be capturing every single query that gets executed across the data products. Yeah.
Data mesh needs to answer to lack of skills and people. That if every domain has its ownership and its own infrastructure,
yep,
it requires to have its own data engineers and data analysts, and
correct,
it might require more skills.
Yes. And so that's good, because that gets me on to the next couple of slides. Let's talk about that for a moment. So actually, before we get onto that, I'll just talk one slide and then we'll go on to that, because that's a really good point. When people talk about data mesh, and I see this a lot, so I just got one slide, one quick thing on here. The word mesh is interesting. The word mesh refers to the data products being, if you like, the things and the relationships between the things, right? So the things are products, right? And you could have I could build a data product which consumes the result of Arnaud's data product. So he builds a data product, I look at that and go, that's cool. I want to bring this other data in that I'm responsible for. Maybe he's in marketing, I'm in operations. I'm bringing that in. I've got access to the operations source or data, whatever. I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to combine that. I'm going to create a new data product. The data products are the balls, if you will, or the points in the mesh. The fact that I'm consuming his data product means that's the relationship between our data products. That's the basis of the term mesh. I hear lots of people talk about computers and stuff. It's products and relationships between them. So decentralization and de-skilling. So this is kind of what we tend to see, and this is what you tend to move towards. So data mesh, this is where reality and theory kind of go separate ways. Right, data mesh says you do this, right? You get your data engineers, as you said, and you sort of stick them into the teams. You have data modelers, data architects, data engineers, data scientists, etc., and you put them in the organisation or units. And down here, you don't have anyone. That's not really what happens, and based on my conversations and my experience, you do still have those. The role that these people play in these teams is different in different organisations. So sometimes those data engineers will be responsible for building the data products. And that's one approach. Sometimes they will be responsible for helping the teams build the data products. And there's lots of words I've heard around this. So like capability squad was one that I heard recently. One that I really liked was personal trainers. Right, so you guys are familiar with a personal trainer. It's someone that gets you out of bed in the morning, shouts at you to run faster, and then you get tired. But you as a person, you do the running and you get stronger and fitter. That's the theory, right? But the personal trainer, they're really just shouting at you. And once you get good at running, maybe you go and do something else, right? You go lifting things. I'm an expert in this area, right? And so that concept of the data engineer now not necessarily being the one that does the running, but being the one that does the, in the personal training world, do the shouting at you and telling you what to do to get fitter, faster. That then means that what your marketing people, for example, your marketing analysts start becoming like data citizens or whatever, citizen data engineers, right? So what you're really doing, this is a model that I've seen work quite well, is your data engineers become like coaches to the rest of the team. So they may do some work, they may build data products, but the rest of the organization, the rest of the domain become much higher skilled, etc., etc. And then the last point I will say is technology choices make a big difference, right? If you are expecting these marketing analysts to suddenly learn Java or Scala or Python, maybe Python, Java or Scala or something, when really they're people who know SQL, give them tools that allow them to do the job with SQL, right? These are just some, simple things, right? Just you choose technologies that help them to become more productive. So there are lots of, you're correct with your concern about lots more people. I had exactly this conversation with Max Schultz of Zalando, and they've chosen their technologies so they didn't have to recruit lots of people. That was one of their big criteria, really, for choosing tech. Does that answer some of your question? So I can talk about this stuff for hours.
I see many data engineers there, and they're always eager and very happy to talk more about business, to talk to business people. But sometimes we are not even allowed to talk to business people. I have one of my reportees that got an email because he talked directly to a business guy, and he wasn't allowed to because the data team is there to provide the service to other team. And so the resistance, I don't think it's even on the data engineer side, but it's on the business organization, because business guys are golden and create the value of the company, and you cannot slow them down by talking technology to them or so on and so forth. And you're talking about Python, Scala, but I would love them to learn SQL.
That sounds like a business that's going very rapidly bankrupt to me.
No, because they have a lot of money, so it can go on.
They're going to spend a lot. I'm being flippant, right? But that sounds like an organisation that's not really. This is a big organisational change, right? Sounds like it's not an organisation that's ready for a big organisational change. So I probably wouldn't talk about data mesh to them. And in fact, actually, so on that, I had a CDO say something to me, which was, he said the first rule of data mesh is don't talk about data mesh. And that sounds like really crazy coming from someone who's written books on it and articles and talks about data mesh a lot. The analysts, business people don't care. They've got a decision to make to do something to make some money. They don't care. What they want, and this is why I would maybe have the conversation, is go to the person who makes the decision and say, if you could have the data that you want to, when you need to, in the way you want it, do you want that? That's not, and that's really what, where data mesh gets you, but we don't talk about data mesh because they don't care about data mesh, but they care about being able to answer the question they need to answer to make the decision to take the action. So first rule of data mesh is don't mention data mesh. One of the CDOs I talk to regularly mentioned that, and I thought that was quite interesting and quite important. So I'm conscious of time. How many more minutes do we have?
We can go till 7:40. 30 more minutes.
Let me just. I need to fix this slide. This slide should build a bit. But so so this isn't a great slide, but I just wanted to make sure that when I put that slide up at the beginning, I talked about operational and ETL, data pipeline, and analytical, and I mentioned about data products. I think it's worth thinking about that pipeline doesn't magically disappear. What really happens is we create a data product from the source, and actually there's this concept of a source-aligned data product. So we create a data product that looks maybe like the source system, and then someone else creates a data product which consumes that data product. So we're now at like the second level of data product. And then maybe someone else creates another data product which consumes that second data product and maybe some others, and makes a third and a fourth and a fifth. And so this becomes that kind of mesh that I talked about. But also, it kind of becomes a data pipeline. So we're not getting rid of data pipelines. What we're basically saying is that each bit of the data pipeline is owned by somebody, and their name is associated with the data product. So if there's a problem with it, and if it changes, and et cetera, we know exactly who we have to go to. There is still a pipeline there. It's just that all of it is owned and all of it is managed, and every part of it is, made. There's accountability throughout the whole process. And so I just want to make sure that that's, we're not kind of lost there. We didn't lose that concept. So I'm going to switch over to data products. So I talked about this reactive and proactive approach. So when we think about that, we need to make sure that our data products are usable by end users, by consumers, or by other people who want to build data products, right? So they need to be able to find them. They need to be easily understood. What does this data product contain? They need to have security. We need to be able to see the lineage and the provenance, the ownership of these data products. We need to make sure that there's a level of kind of trustworthiness in the data. There's a bunch of Zermatt calls them affordances. Attributes is probably a good enough term. There's attributes of the data product that make it easy for people to consume and use and find, etc. That we want to, we want these data products to have. And different books will talk about different lists, different websites, different lists. But broadly, discoverability, addressability, sort of connecting to it, trusting it, securing it, interoperability. These are broadly the important things. And so when I think about data products, I've kind of talked about them, but I haven't really talked about what they really are. And I'd like to talk through this slide a little bit, because when I am in conferences, I regularly see other software vendors basically make shit up, for want of a better term. So I see a lot of people go, yeah, we do data mesh, we've got these tables and they're data products. Can you put into a table just some information about the trustworthiness of that table? Who owns that table? Is there somewhere in a table that you can put the name of the person who is responsible for that table? It doesn't really make sense. So that's just nonsense. This concept of bringing metadata and data together, that makes a bit more sense, right? If we think about metadata being technical metadata, columns, schemas, data types, and then we think about ownership. Right, who's the owner of the table, right? We can put that into metadata. Also, things like attributes, like tags. So this data contains information about customer. This data contains information about product, or whatever it is. The sort of stuff you'd find in a catalogue. And then I would go one step further, which is security. So the policies that are associated with the data product should live within the data product. Right? Who knows data better? Who knows finance data better than the finance team? Who knows marketing data better than the marketing team? Right? Who knows what it should be used for, and who should be able to use it better than the marketing team? And this gets us, we may come back to this, but this gets us into a really interesting conversation about kind of security and different security models. But we'll leave that, because we may come back to it if we have time. Access patterns. This, I think, is, I may remove this one in future, because I think this has kind of gone away, but for the longest time people were sort of saying, well, we can access it using, as a stream. It's a data product. I would suggest that you should be able to access a data product as a stream, as an API, through SQL, through Python, and all the rules about the data product still apply. So if it's secure, if I've got policies that say Andy can see this data when I access it through SQL, those policies apply when I access it as a stream, or I access it using machine learning or whatever. So this is kind of an important concept. The next one is code, and this is where we start getting into what I would consider to be a proper data product. The code in a data product is the code that creates the data. And then finally, and this hopefully will pull all that together, this thing over here where we bring in infrastructure. So I think about a data product being a text file, which sounds like lunacy or craziness. So I think it's a text file that contains a series of instructions. The instructions say, give me some computers. All right, we can do infrastructure as code. Start up some services on those computers. Compute some sort of compute engine. Run this code on that compute engine on those computers. That generates me some data. Now we've got that data. I've landed it some sort of data set, view, materialized view table, whatever it is. Then the next stage is I'm going to use some metadata. I'm going to have some declarative statements that say this data set that's just been created using this code or updated based on the latest data or whatever the code says. This data can only be accessed by these people in this way. That goes into the policy management system. From defining the data product, pushed into the policy management system. And then things like catalog information, right? So this data product has got customer data in it. I want to push that into the catalog. That information is all declared in that text file. That text file can go into GitHub and it can have CI/CD associated with it. So now we've got versioning of data products and we can do branches and all that good stuff. When someone comes and accesses the data, they search, they find, they search for customer, they find that information in the catalog. That information originated in their data product definition. When they go and query that data using whatever engine they're using, the rules that I put into the policy management system from my data product come into play and prevent them from seeing the data that they shouldn't see. This is what I think a data product is. It's a text file full of statements that build some data sets for us, ultimately. Thoughts, comments, issues?
Yeah.
Stunned silence. It's a very different way of viewing the world, right?
I wasn't used to see the infrastructure. I thought the infrastructure would be something federated and provided to teams as an asset, and they weren't. But that's true that our data engineers are used to develop their own infrastructure, to terraform their own resources. So yeah, that's true.
You could go down serverless, right? I'm not saying this has to be the case. You could have like a serverless or a cluster of computers that are already available, and just sit there waiting for people to run things against. There is the downside of that, of course, is that you may have contention, right? So as part of your data product, you may have SLAs that say this data product will run in 10 minutes, just picking some numbers. And if I'm on shared infrastructure, I can't necessarily guarantee that. So if you come and use all of the compute resource and your data product runs at the same time, mine's probably going to take more than 10 minutes, right? And so this is why that separation of infrastructure and being able to just stand up some computers and run something and then close it down makes a lot of sense. But there's, this is kind of, I guess, this is, I think, where we should be aiming for. But as with all things in technology, we make compromises, right? And architecture comes in. There may be technology that we've got, legacy systems or whatever it is, that prevent us from being able to do everything we want to do. So, I'm not saying if you're not there, it's not perfect. The reality is most companies are going to be somewhere else, probably. But I think that's where we should be aiming for.
And where do you put quality testing, for example? It's an access pattern?
So that's a good question. So you could... I kind of said there's a difference between theory and reality. And when I talked about the central team going away, what we actually see is an enabling team staying, a central enabling team. And that central enabling team don't actually build things for anyone, they build things for everyone. So the simple example I like to give here is we may have a common way of representing customer. I pick customer because everyone kind of understands. Right, so we have a common way of representing customer. And maybe the way we build that customer key is from a number of different variables or whatever. So that enabling team might go away and build like a user-defined function. So like a common function that everyone can just use, and it builds the customer key based on some parameters that we give it. So it's just a function out there. Now, we see enabling teams in organizations that have adopted data mesh building these things, because then when the domains come along and go, oh, I need to join these fields together to make this custom key, and it needs to be in this way, they don't have to worry about it. They just they just call this function with some parameters, and they get out the customer key that in a way that is common across everything else. So the reason I mention that is because when we get into this space over here, and we get into unit testing, if you will, I think it's arguably there's a few places this goes, and this is not well defined yet. But I could definitely see, as part of the metadata in a data product, us having declarative statements that say, check that there's no PII data. Now, what actually happens under the covers is built by that enabling team. So we always check PII data in the same way, but in the data product, we define that we're going to check for PII data. We'll come back on that in a bit more detail, because there's in the governance piece, because there's some other things that we can get into. But that's a good thought, actually. So the reason I put this slide up is because I want to make really clear that data mesh tells us that there is a complete separation between the self-service infrastructure team and the data team. People who run computers, not the same people as people who do stuff with data. And if we think about, and that's quite a big shift. If we think about a DBA, like an Oracle DBA of old, long ago I used to work with lots of Oracle DBAs, and they were always grumpy old fellas. Everyone always came to them with complaints, but they would be responsible for like an Oracle appliance, like an Exadata or a rack or whatever. And if the queries or something wasn't running fast, then they might go in and like modify some of the parameters of the operating system or the kernel, or they might go and change more, give more memory to that or whatever. And they might go and say, actually, the way you're using the structure of the data model is not quite right for this sort of workload, so they go and restructure that. That concept of one individual, one group of people modifying infrastructure and data is completely against data mesh. Right? Data mesh says these are two separate concerns. Someone is there to be responsible for the self-service platform, to provide computers and technical capabilities. Someone is there to concentrate on data. So one set have got a first-class concern is, capabilities, technology capabilities, software, technology, computers, whatever. The other one is their first-class concern is data. There is a complete separation. And sometimes I say that to people and they get a bit upset, but this is what data mesh suggests, that we have the way we have to think about the world. So this is sorry, I'm checking because I'm worried that we're going to run over.
We have 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes.
Yeah,
I'll be quick. Right. So when we're thinking about technology choices for data mesh, in the past we have a combination of non-functional requirements. It must work with security in this way. It must store data in this way. We have functional requirements. The system must allow the end users to have it in blue, or to run this thing, or to do. The users must be able to do something. I would argue that the most important thing when we're thinking about technologies for data mesh is interoperability. What I mean by that is if I've got Starburst, if I've got a SQL engine, I've got a machine learning engine, and I've got Kafka, streaming engine, and I want my data product to be available through all of those engines, and I want security across all of those engines, and I want to be able to find stuff across all those engines. What I can't have is I can't have the situation where I have locked-in metadata, where I have a system that has its own metadata store that no one else can access. Because if we think about the problem, the downstream implication of that is I end up having a situation where I build a data product. It's based on we have this we have this metadata around this data product, around this data product. Let's say in a SQL engine. Now I want to access it using a machine learning tool. I can't access that metadata because it's closed, it's locked in, it's proprietary, right? So what do I have to do? I have to copy that metadata out or synchronize it in some way. Okay, that's pretty rubbish, but let's do it. Who's going to do that in my organization? metadata is a data concern, so it can't be the self-service infrastructure team. So we're asking people in marketing to synchronize metadata servers, to synchronize data security systems. You know, that's just nonsense. So what we need to have is open systems. This is the implication of data mesh is open systems. So I have, you know, in this case I've got a Hive Metastore. So I'll be open. You could have Databricks, you could have Confluent, and you could have Starburst using a single metadata store. Right, they can all talk to the metadata store. Purview, from Azure, Glue, Dataproc, basically Hive metadata servers, right? We've standardized on how Hive metastores. If you choose a technology which cannot work with a Hive metastore, and you've got technology you want in the future technologies that do, or you have technologies in the past that do as well, don't choose that technology. Don't buy a tech that it can't integrate with a Hive metastore, because basically you're going to very quickly get into a centralized bottleneck, which is going to be, you know, the opposite of a data mesh. The same is true of enterprise security. Have a policy management system, and there are lots out there, Ranger, Immuta, Privacera, that lots of things can just communicate with and work with, so I have one definition, one instance. The same with the data catalog. I think this is really important, because there's just no organizational unit to manage, run, operate these things if we, you know, in terms of synchronization. So when I think about platforms, self-service platforms, these are, and I've sort of touched on a lot of these, but these are the sort of things that we need to think about. Domains need to be autonomous. We need to have stuff that interoperates, as I said. We need to separate data and infrastructure. It needs to be self-service. And these are some of the things that the platform needs to provide to allow us to do governance. So, you know, we need access controls, we need security, ownership, quality, usage metrics, which I've put on there because we need to know who's using our data products. We need to, in the self-service platform, we need to have the capabilities that the domains can use to understand who's using their data. Right, so that's a technology capability. Things like provenance and etc. as well. And I'm purposely going through this quick because I want to get to governance. So, let's go to, let's go to, sorry, we're going to go on side here. Right, that's fine. All right, governance is this, federated computation governance, to say, is this complicated subject. The way that I would suggest we think about governance in data mesh is we get those domain owners together and they define the rules. So the rules are we must not expose PII data. Right, it's a very simple rule. They define that. So we get the head of marketing, the head of finance, head of operations. They all come together. That's the way. That's what we're going to do. It is then the responsibility of the domains, the people in the domains, the data product developers, to implement that rule in whatever way, shape, or form they see fit. So, did anything not make sense?
I was curious about something.
Yep.
When you thought that everything should be compatible with Hive Metastore.
I'm just picking that because everything is now. With
sure.
Glue and Purview and Dataproc.
But Hive Metastore is quite technical and it only says what is stored where, but it doesn't provide a rich definition as a catalog could do. Yeah,
so there, if you notice, there was another catalog on there. So I don't think of the Hive. That's weird. Okay. Okay. I don't think of the Hive Metastore. There we go. As a data catalog. I think about it as a metadata repository. Okay. So I think that maybe. Yeah. Yes. And obviously the reason you need a Hive Metastore is for object store like data S3, ADLS, GCS, HDFS, etc. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So yeah, I think about I don't. Maybe that's a good point actually. I just don't think of the Hive Metastore as a catalog because you're right. It's really not. Okay. So.
You can present Starburst for people who maybe don't know.
Oh, there's a question. It's the troublemaker at the back here.
So you want to push the data mesh towards the full data mesh towards infrastructure. So you need Spark, Kafka, so real-time OLAP.
You don't need those. It depends on. So let me just clear that up. So what we tend to see is I've got another slide actually on another deck, but so I see digital native organisations that are born in the cloud, where they've got all their stuff in the cloud. they tend to have a very small number of actual places that they store data, right? S3 or GCS or ADLS, whatever. Banks, for example, that have been around for hundreds of years, they have every system known to man. They have all the different versions of Oracle, and all the different versions of Teradata, and all the different versions of Cloudera. Because why not? And so what I see with data mesh is those two ends of the spectrum are kind of say, we want to adopt data mesh, and what they're really doing is they're kind of moving towards this middle. And what's happening is the digital native organizations are kind of finding out that actually S3 is wonderful for historical immutable data, but maybe they need a transactional system for some of the domains. Say, actually, I need something that updates on a more regular basis, or whatever. I need updates, and so they will go to the self-service team and say, I need this capability, and then the self-service team will provide that. Well, actually, here's Postgres, or here's a database, or whatever. The other happens from the other place where they kind of go, we've got all these things. For this particular, for marketing, do we need all these things? No. Okay, so can we turn this off? Maybe, because the marketing people don't use it, and if they're not using it, then no one else should be. So I guess this is, if you had domains that said, we need streaming data, we need to do machine learning, and we need to do SQL, then you might have these three, and you might have other things as well. These are just three that I put up. So this is just an example, I guess. You might have a situation where all of your domains just use SQL, right? In which case you wouldn't need Spark and Kafka. But the likelihood is, at some point, you're going to need other things, I guess. Does that make sense? Or what?
My point is, like, if you want to interact between different products,
Mm-hmm.
and it's different infrastructures, you need real time.
Mm-hmm.
Like with BigQuery, Redshift, and so on, it's not real time OLAP, and you cannot interact with each other. And therefore, if you want to push to the infrastructure, you cannot really use this OLAP, we are not OLAP real time, to push data mesh toward the infrastructure. You can just do the organizational part.
Yeah. So you just the term real time is the really interesting term there. So I'm a member of the Data Mesh Learning Slack community. It's quite a dull group. I wouldn't join it unless you really want to spend your weekends arguing with people. There is, a while ago, about 3 months, maybe longer, maybe 6 months ago, someone started to talk about real time and data mesh. And basically the community kind of almost split into two. Massive arguments. And you'd be surprised, how angry people can get about data mesh. And from my perspective, I don't really care, but I think you should have the capability to do real time and not real, and like historic data or whatever, batch processing. I think you should have the capability, but I don't have a vested interest. So from my point of view, it was quite interesting because every so often I just ask like a question just to annoy people and start a big argument. But there's a community of people who say actually you should not have real time in a data mesh. Right? You should not have real time data. There's a community of people that say actually 100% you should, and this gets into a more complex conversation about, if I think about a data product, the output of that data product, I think you might want to push into a operational system for kind of real-time usage, right? And so there's an interesting, we could stand in front of a whiteboard and talk about this in great detail. I would suggest, and this is, I'm going to have to refer to Starburst because this is like a how question. So what I would do with Starburst is I'd have the end user run a query into Starburst, and I'd have that Starburst go for this bit of the query, I'm going to query a Kafka stream, or I'm going to just hit the operational system for, because I want what the data looks like now, and I want to join that with, 100 terabytes of data from the CNS feed, right? And Starburst can do that, right? So I purposely don't try and talk about Starburst when I'm talking about data mesh because I don't want to Starburst for data mesh. But Starburst has some capabilities that solve some of the how questions. So I work for Starburst. I would use Starburst for bringing together real-time data and historical data across clouds, or on-prem in the cloud, or across regions in clouds, or however the data resides, because that's really what it does. But that's I don't want to get too much into why Starburst. because you know, really we're here for talk about data mesh. But there are technologies that allow you to solve the questions that you're asking for. It's just not the technologies you've mentioned. Does that make sense? Right.
If you want to continue the conversation on the 8th floor, we will have a drink there. So you're welcome to come and ask Andy, I, or anyone questions about data mesh, data,
or you can not. You can just have the wine.
Yeah.
You know, I'm easy with that. Don't tell people they have to talk to me. Tell people that they can have wine. That would be more attractive as a proposition.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone likes wine.
Thank you for coming. We are used to do roti at Ippon. It's return on time invested. It's 1 to 5. You vote with your fingers. And 1 is the worst talk ever. 5 is.
They do that in front of me.
Yeah.
Should I not leave the room?
No.
Jeez.
And 5 is the best moment of your life. So no, maybe the best talk you've been this year in physics.
Oh, no, I don't think I want to have this fit. It's going to be brutal.
And of course, if you give a bad rate, you need to explain why. But we want to continuously improve. So when I count to 3, if you want, you can vote. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So do I have a 1? No 1. A 2. A 3. Okay. 3. Do you want to provide maybe a recommendation for the next one?
Maybe be more concise.
More.
Concise.
Sorry. Yeah, no, that's very good. Very good. Sorry. That is a problem I have. Yeah, no, that is true. Yes, that's a good point. I try. There's a famous quote, isn't there? I wanted to write a short letter, but I didn't have time. That's how I feel. Yeah. But no, that's good feedback. Thank you.
Okay. Someone want to share another recommendation? That's fine. We can go have a drink. Okay, cool. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.